In this video, we're going to be looking at one of the most important topics in CSS, if not the most important topic in CSS. So I want you to pay very good attention. Now, what we're going to be looking at in this video is called the box model. The box model. Now, the elements on our page are going to be placed in containers most of the time, and these containers gives us a very easy way to position our elements anywhere on the page, and also to style our elements. They can serve as references for us to style these elements, but the most important use of containers is in positioning, and positioning is a very great topic. It's a very important topic in CSS. That's why I want you to pay very good attention to this. We're going to be working with a box because containers are like boxes containing elements. So I want you, once again, I cannot overemphasize this, to pay very good attention. To illustrate the box model, I have a div here within my body. Now the div tag is the most important and the most popular container you're going to be using in CSS. Sorry about that. It's the most important container you're going to be using in CSS. So I want to just get used to that. To style my div, I have my style tags open here inside my head. And quickly, I'm going to give this div an ID of box in order to style it. Just give it an ID of box. And when I go into my page and review this, you see nothing is displayed on my page right now. Now divs are a way of just marking out a portion of your page, a space in your page for use, to either contain an element or to serve as a portion of the page for any purpose you intend to use it for. Now, you see, by default, I'm not seeing anything on my page. The fact that I placed a div on my page, I'm not seeing anything. That's why the div is actually, it's because the div is actually a container. It's just simply a container, and since it contains nothing, we see nothing. So simply, I'm going to just write in this div, I'm going to say the box model. The box model. Let's make this capital. Okay, the box model. Save that. I'll go to my page and refresh, and simply says the box model. Now there's nothing special about this right now, because fine, I have this text contained in the div container, but I have little information about the container, the div container I'm using. Now that's where a particular add-on on Firefox that I have on my browser, on my Firefox browser right now, is really going to come in very handy. The add-on is called Web Developer. You can get it at Mozilla site. You could just Google it, Mozilla Web Developer, and one of the tabs that is actually the array of tabs that Web Developer comes with, and one of the tabs is called Information, and with this information I can display the properties of my div. So first, I'm going to go to this information and click display div dimensions. When I click that, simply tells me that the div with the ID of box has a width of 1350 pixels and a height of 20 pixels. Now, that's because the div runs, you can see this outline, the div runs from one end of the page to another. Now that's the width of divs by default. If a width is not specified on a particular div, it will simply run from one end of the page to the other end, and the height of the div is going to be depending on whatsoever it contains and the default padding that the browser gives it. We're going to go into paddings later on, but let's just continue with this. So I have it by box model. Now I can see my width and height. The width is simply the screen width, and the height is based on the padding supplied by the browser and the height of this containing text. So I'll just reload that. Just go back to the default. Then I'll go back into my code, and now I'm going to be setting properties on this div. First thing I'm going to be setting on this div is going to be a height and a width. So I'm simply going to access my div with this ID. I'm going to give it a width of say 300 pixels. I'm going to give it a height of 200 pixels. Now I have a defined width and height, or a fixed width and height. Width 300 pixel, height 200 pixels. I'm going to Firefox, I refresh the page, and you see when I refresh the page, I simply I can't see the changes that have been made. Everything just remains the same. But when I go to my web developer and click information, display div dimensions, you see now gives me the information I need. The div with the ID of box has a width of 300 pixels and a height of 200 pixels, and you can see the outline here, exactly how it is defined. The width and the height that we defined is what the web developer is showing. Now I'm just going to refresh that so that we can go back to our default to see the effect very well, so that we don't have to go to web developer all the time. I'm simply going to give this a background color. Let's say background color of blue. Let's give it blue, and so that we can see the text very well, I'm just going to give it a text color of white. Save that. I'm going to go into Firefox and refresh the page, and as you can see, I have my box outlined here, so we don't have to always go to web developer to actually see the outline of our box. Now you notice the text inside the box is actually touching the edges of the box. You can, if you look at the left here, you see that the T I have here is touching the left edge, and also this is touching the top of the text is touching the top of the box, even though the browser tries to supply a very small padding on top, but this might not be enough most of the time. Now that's where paddings come in. Now what paddings mainly do is to provide some sort of cushion effect to the content of your container. They sort of pad it by a certain amount, which you definitely would define, and they pad it at the top, right, bottom, and left side. This could be defined individually, and a value can be defined for them all. Now I'm simply going to define a padding for this box. If we check the dimensions of this box, we see it's still 300 by 200. Exactly. Now when you give a box a padding, the value of the padding actually adds up to the width of the box, because paddings are supplied inside the box. They are supplied inside the container. They are spaces inside the container, so they definitely add to the width and height of the box. Now let me quickly just define a padding for this. I'm going to define a general padding first. I'm going to give it a padding of 10 pixels. Now when I set padding this way, it's simply going to give each side of the box a padding of 10 pixels. This value will apply to all sides. So I'm going to just save that and go into Firefox. I'm going to refresh the page, and as you can see, we now have space between the content of the box and the edges of the box. This is actually how paddings come into play. Now we have a 10 pixel spacing up here. We have a 10 pixel spacing running by the left hand side here, and we also have 10 pixel spacing at the bottom and at the right. So in order to see the effect of that, I'm going to go into information and display div dimensions again, and as you can see, my width is now 320 and my height is now 220. Now you might want to ask yourself, how did we come about this? The width became 320 because initially this box has a width of 300. Now a padding of 10 pixel is at the left hand side here, and another padding of 10 pixel is running through the right hand side here. So we have 10 plus 300, that's 310, plus another 10 by the right here, making 320. And the same goes for the height also. The height is now 220 because it's now made up of a 10 pixel padding up here, a 200 pixel height, and another 10 padding pixel at the bottom. So we have 10 plus 200 plus 10, giving us 220. So I want to note this very well. If you want your box to be exactly 300 pixel by 200 pixel, and you know you're going to be giving it a padding of 10 pixel, you might want to just decrease the height and the width by 20 each. That's the initial height and width of the box, so that when you now add your padding of 10 pixel, you can still go back to the size that you've planned for the box. So we're going to refresh that. So I'll go back to our default. We can see the effect of our padding. So as I said, padding controls spacing inside the box. So we just jump to our code. To set individual paddings, you just give them a suffix of hyphen, then I say left. For example, if I want a padding of like 30 pixels to the left, just say padding left 30 pixel, and when I refresh that, you see that the padding at the left is actually what is increased, and the padding at the top stays the same. Padding at the left just increased. Now I expect my box to be something like 330 because I have a padding of 30 pixel here plus 300. So just go to information, display div dimensions. As you can see, I have a width of 330 and my height still stays at 200 because the top and the bottom paddings that contribute to the height of the box were not defined. The same way we said padding hyphen left, we can have padding bottom, padding top, padding right for the individual sides. But I'm just going to leave this at padding 10. Good. Now the next thing we're going to be looking at is borders. We're going to be looking at borders. Now you can actually set a width, a border rather, around your box to kind of outline your box, and borders are set using the border property. And just like paddings, borders can either be set for all the sides, that's having the same value for all the sides, or they can be set individually by having a hyphen left, hyphen bottom, hyphen top suffix. So here, when you're setting a border, the first thing you want to set is the border width. The width of the border, which is actually the thickness of the border. So here I'm just going to be giving this border 2 pixels. Now the next thing you set is the type of the border. There are actually different types of border. There's solid, which we're going to be using here. There's groove, there's thin, there's thick, there's ridge, there's inset, outset. You can just check up one of the references we're going to be giving you before the end of this tutorial to see a list of border types. So here we're just going to be using solid, and the third option, which is quite optional, is the color of the border. If you don't set the color for the border, it will appear by default as the color of the text that is contained in the container. For example, the color of the text inside this container is white, so if I don't give this border any color value, it's going to take up white. Now because white is not going to be showing very well on our screen, I'm simply going to give this a border of red. I'm going to save that. Now this applies to all. This applies to all. If I want this to apply to just one, I'll just give it a suffix of, let's say, left, and it will only apply, to the left or right or bottom or top. But here I'm just going to run this for all. So I'll save that. As you can see, border, the first value is the thickness, then you put a space, and the type could be solid, inset, outset, groove, whatever. Then the color, whichever color you want. I'm just going to jump into my browser, refresh the page, and as you can see, I have a 2 pixel red border running around my box. Very nice effect, isn't it? When it's needed, actually. So now, one thing you have to know about borders is that they also contribute to the width of the box. Just the same way paddings contribute to the width of the box, borders also contribute to the width of the box. Now, this box is initially 300 pixels in width. I added a 10 pixel padding, and from the contribution of the 10 pixel on the left and the 10 pixel on the right, the width of this box now becomes 320. Now I've just added a border with a thickness of 2 pixels, and I have 2 pixels at the left here and 2 pixels at the right. So this automatically adds 2 plus 2, that's 4 pixels to the width at the present moment. Now to see the effect of that, when I go to information and display the dimensions, and I have 324. It was initially 320, now we have 324. And if you look at the height also, the height is now 224 because we also have 2 pixels running on top and 2 pixels running under, which contributes to the height of the box. So that's another thing you have to take into account. Borders increase the width of your container, so make sure you consider that whenever you're planning your layout. Good. If you simply refresh that and you can see our box again. Now the last thing we're going to be looking at is margins. Going to be like margins. Now when we're treating paddings, I said that paddings control space within the box, the control space within the container. Now margins control space outside the container. They control the spacing of the container relative to the container that is next to it, or the main container, that's the parent container. Here the main container is simply our body, is our viewport, so every margin we set will be relative to the sides of our viewport. But in a parent-child system, any margin that is set is relative to the parent container. Now I'm simply going to go back into my code, and here I'm going to be setting individual margins, because just the same way we can set individual paddings and individual borders, we can set individual margins. Now here the only margins that will actually be able to see their effect is the margin left, which is going to contribute to pushing the box towards the right, and the margin top, which is going to contribute to pushing the box downwards. Because the higher the margin top, the lower the box goes relative to our viewport, and the higher the margin left, the more the box shifts to the right, because the spacing on the left is increased, so the box automatically shifts to the right. Now let's go to my code, say margin left. I'm going to set margin left first. I'm going to set it to something very obvious. See, 100 pixels. I'm going to save that. Now this is going to shift my box 100 pixels away from the left side of the parent container, which right now is the browser window. So I'm going to refresh, and as you can see, this box shifts by 100 pixels. Shift 100 pixels away from the left side of my browser window. In a similar way, I'm going to set margin top. I'm going to set that to another 100 pixels so that the effect can be very visible. 100 pixels, save. Go into Firefox and refresh, and you see the box is pushed down by 100 pixels rather. Margins are very wonderful ways of shifting your box around from the positioning your box at certain locations where you want them to be. You can keep changing the values to position your box in the exact place where you want it to be. And margins do not increase the size of the box. They do not increase because they only control spacing outside the box, not within the box or at the edges of the box. It's just outside the box. So for example, to just verify that we display our div dimensions, you see our box is still 324 by 224, the same way we left it. So guys, I hope you understand the whole concept of the box model. We're still going to be doing a lot of things with boxes, but if it would be helpful to you, you might want to rewatch this video over and over again to get the full concept of the box model, the use of paddings, margins, borders, and have a good grip on